This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
You heard us talk about the great wealth transfer before. Well, these are the trillions of dollars that baby boomers have saved that will eventually be inherited by heirs. This year, the first boomers turn 80. An article I recently read on Newsweek.com said that the great wealth transfer may never come. They believe the cost of living, healthcare, and people living longer will actually eat up a lot of that wealth. And the other enemy, Uncle Sam and taxes. So if that's a big concern, Mark, how can we address it?
Planning, and discussion. This is so close to my heart because, I was raised in a strong family environment and we think intergenerationally in my church culture. It's always been part of my personal programming. And so it's interesting to see how many people choose not to leave anything to their kids. They really want to just spend it all themselves. Others are very sensitive to the fact that it's much more challenging, I think, for the younger generation today than it has been in the past. And so some of us are doing things to help our adult children and doing it now while we can see the disposition of those funds and we can see the benefit of those funds to our children now. Taxes are a big concern, though. I mean, just this last week, my associate and I were working on about 10 different cases where we were calculating ways to reduce taxes, and particularly through the Roth conversion strategies. So we've talked about this before. People have IRAs that have never been taxed before. To the degree they're willing to pay the tax on it now, we can liberate that money and convert it into tax-free Roth IRA status. We're showing a number of people how to save tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. But we were literally talking this morning, my associate and I, about two people. There were two different prospective clients where to them, the tax savings wasn't going to be that great for their own lifetime. For their children are professionals who will inherit whatever the parents don't have. And most of us will end up leaving something because we don't quite spend through it all. Well, the children are most likely to inherit that during their peak earning years. And so suddenly that forces the children up into a 30+% tax bracket, which is not something the parents had. We can show the parents how to convert that money and pay taxes of 10 to 15% maybe, versus the kids having to pay 30+%. So there's a lot to be considered here. And I always say, if you love your children, let's have these conversations. If you hate your children, well, don't do anything. You'll leave them problems. And that's usually not how people are programmed. Most of us are completely devoted to our children. Our hearts have been with them. And I think our money should be as well. I think intergenerationally. So I'd say, come talk to us, folks. We can share ideas with you. We can show you how to maximize your legacy and actually leave something, preserve the legacy from Uncle Sam.
I love that. Yeah, maximizing your legacy and really finding out the best way to do it so that's beneficial to you and, of course, your heirs, right? This is certainly a conversation that needs to be had about maximizing your legacy. Again, all part of this My Golden Years roadmap, guys. Everybody's roadmap is going to be different. It's going to be customized just for you, and it's complimentary. That phone number, 702-996-4050. 702-996-4050. That website, mygoldenyearsroadmap.com. Usually if you're watching somebody and you can really tell they don't really know what they're doing, right? They kind of slow down, they second guess it, they kind of back up, they stop altogether. Even when the path is literally right in front of them, it's actually pretty clear. Well, comedian Brad Upton, he gives us an example. Listen to this.
And who put in all these traffic circles and didn't tell anybody how they work? Oh. That circle doesn't have to be empty for you to enter it. There just has to be enough room for you to fit. Pick out a hole and hit that thing like an NFL running back. If you've ever driven up to a traffic circle and stopped, I want you to go home tonight, lay down your keys, and never, ever pick them up, ever again.
He is kind of right. I remember, driving up into, what do they call it, roundabouts for the first time going, what the heck is this? Like, what? Okay, I guess I go, then you go, and hopefully, it works out, right? I mean, I don't know. I guess you can also use that same thought process if you see people circling around retirement planning, right? They're waiting, they're hesitant, they're not jumping in there when they should. How do you help them get started in getting a plan in place?
Well, first learn the rules. I remember living in Europe in the 70s and 80s where roundabouts were first being introduced, and they came into the U.S. in the 90s and early aughts. Literally yesterday I about got creamed by a guy who didn't know how to work his way through a roundabout, and I just remember shaking my head. I was driving back here to Vegas and thinking, when are people going to learn? We've had these for 20-odd years. But yes, people do. When they deal with something new, something unfamiliar, human nature is to kind of freeze up. It may be analysis paralysis. It may just be fear that paralyzes people, but they stop. Or sometimes in the case of the roundabout, they get off at the wrong exit, or they think they just have to go straight, and sometimes you might have been better served turning right or left.
Exactly.
And so I think that's a great analogy for retirement. We hit this point. We don't always have to stay on the same trajectory that we were on previously. We're going to hit bumps in the roads or roundabouts that give us opportunities, and maybe taking a left turn is going to be better for us in the long run. So it's really about thought. Again, the mental work of preparing for retirement is the true work. And that is, again, where do I want to end up? Where do I want this last chapter of my life to lead me? What gives me passion and purpose? And so before you hit the roundabout, let's have a talk.
Exactly. Let's have that conversation now so you know exactly which way you're going, left, straight, taking a right. And also exactly what you mentioned, the trajectory can change because your life is going to change. Circumstances are going to change. So that roundabout, your exit might turn to a different one later on. So let's keep that circle maintained there, and let's get you on board here with a plan. Call right now for this Golden Years Roadmap. That phone number, 702-996-4050, 702-996-4050. This has been around for a long time. Like 30 years, this so-called 4% rule. But a recent article from MarketWatch says that the rule is blind to new realities of retirement. One reason is it disregards the fact that nobody knows how long that their retirement's going to last. So if the 4% isn't cutting it, is there some new, better way to safely withdraw money in retirements, yet also plan for that longevity?
Oh, absolutely. And this is a great topic to bring up because almost everyone who's given any thought to retirement has heard of this so-called 4% rule. And the history on it is that it was introduced in 1994 by William Bengen, who was a little-known financial planner out of the Midwest. He wrote an article to a financial journal that basically said, hey, guys, if you've got all your money invested in mutual funds like my clients, then you can take up to 4% of your account value out every year and never run out of money. So someone with $500,000 saved could take $20,000 a year out and never run out of money. Well, I was new in the business at the time, just a few years in, and I remember when this all started, and subsequently everyone embraced this like it was, some kind of divine proclamation from Mount Sinai. But the reality is, William Bengen is a really, really bright guy. He's still around. He just wrote another book. But he's a human, and humans assume certain things. The scientific method is we should test certain assumptions. And he had assumptions about when people would retire, at what age, for example. He assumed everyone would be at 65. Well, nowadays, people are leaving on average at age 62, right or wrong. He had certain assumptions about stock returns being 8% over time and bonds being 6.6% over time. Well, that absolutely has not been the case the last 30 years, for example. He had assumptions about inflation. He had assumptions about the composition of the portfolio. There's all sorts of assumptions, and we didn't test them. People just embrace this idea, and fortunately, there's some really bright academics back at the American College, and they really focus on retirement planning. They've come out and said that if you have most of your money in the stock market, usually in the form of mutual funds, you probably shouldn't take more than 2.5% to 3% out, which means suddenly that's a lot less than what you were expecting. So it may be $10,000 to $12,000 out of your $500,000 portfolio each year. And so, yes, we absolutely have to look at alternatives. There are alternative investments like structured notes that can get potentially better rates of return. You've also got income annuity contracts. We talk a lot about this on the show. Your typical income annuity is going to generate about twice as much as a mutual fund portfolio would, according to those academics' recommendations and a number of articles that I can share with people. And the older we are when we actually turn the income on, the greater the percentage we can take out. So I'm glad you brought this up. We shouldn't embrace any one rule as being from the mouth of God, as it were, unless it truly is. This came from the mouth of a man, and it has some weaknesses with it. So I would caution people heavily before you jump off of the employment train and go into retirement. Don't just take a one-size-fits-all rule like 4% and I'm fine, and assume that you will be fine, because the truth is that's caused a lot of heartache to people over the years, particularly because you and I as humans, we don't have any control over when markets go bad, for example, when they go south. If that happens in our early years of retirement when we're first taking income, that can have devastating impacts versus if those market downturns are in later years of retirement. So we don't want to be pulling money entirely from a stock market-based account, which is variable by nature, in other words, going up and down. We want to have a second pocket of money, what I call a two-pocket strategy, where when the market's down, we can reach into another pocket or bucket of money, as it were, and not be affected. That can, for some people, be home equity. For others, that can be income annuities. For others, that can be principal protected structured notes. There's different things we can use. And so if principal protection and safety is a concern to people, come visit with us. That's where we specialize. We're very big advocates of investing in the market. I personally have money in the market, a big portion of my personal savings, but not all of my money's there. And I certainly don't embrace a one-size-fits-all rule like 4% because we're all different. So come visit with us and we can do a customized plan for you and help you have the peace of mind and confidence that you need.
Absolutely. Yeah, this customized income plan that we're talking about here, again, all part of that Golden Years roadmap, helping you get to and through retirement and also answering those questions. Have I saved enough? Have I done enough? Am I going to run out of money? How do you know I'm not going to run out of money? What about inflation? All these things that are keeping you up at night, this is where you bring them all to the table when you sit down with Mark one-on-one for this customized income plan. That phone number, 702-996-4050, 702-996-4050. So here's the deal. If you're still working and have your spouse on your health plan, you're probably paying between $600 and $700 a month. So you might assume that in retirement, once you are on Medicare, that your costs will drop. But let's break down these numbers. They actually say two people on Medicare at the base level run about $410 a month. And then if you add a Medigap plan, that's another $200 to $300 a month. So really, you're right back to where you started at that $600 to $700 range here. Does this conversation surprise any of your clients, Mark?
Oh, absolutely, because it's worse, actually, than what you just said. And, I mean, not to correct you, but it's $202 right now per spouse to participate in Medicare. So there's your $400. Your Medicare supplement or Medigap plans are going to add another $200 to $300, more likely $400 in some markets on top of that. But a Medicare supplement plan doesn't cover dental, vision, hearing, or prescription drugs. And those add a lot of cost on top of it. That's why we're seeing a massive trend shift away from the Medicare supplements to the more sometimes restrictive Medicare Advantage plans. I mean, that's been a very clear shift I've seen over the last 10, 15 years. It's just kind of flip-flopped. It's interesting that just a couple weeks ago, Fidelity came out with their study estimating healthcare cost in retirement. I don't know if you've heard of this. Most people haven't. Fidelity Investments, the investment people, actually do a study every year. They've done this for 25 years now, where they estimate what the cost is per person on average in retirement for healthcare expenses. And they're not looking at long-term care, which is the big bugger that blows everything up. They're just looking at pure healthcare expenses like these Medicare co-pays and dental, vision, and hearing prescriptions and things we were just talking about, those Medicare premiums. And they say per person, you should expect $185,000 in expenses. That's $370,000 for a married couple over the course of their retirement. It's not saying you're going to have all those expenses on day one of retirement, that you have to have, a married couple doesn't have to have $370,000 already earmarked just for medical expenses. But they are saying you should expect to cash flow that out of your Social Security, out of your pensions, out of your investments. You're going to have these kind of expenses if you're like the average American. And again, that does not cover long-term care, which I feel passionately about, having lived it for 30 years with various family members. Long-term care is that non-skilled custodial care that people need on top of Medicare. So that's the help dressing, eating, bathing, toileting, getting out of a bed or a chair, things like that, cognitive elements. You think of Michael J. Fox, you think of Christopher Reeves, accidents and illnesses, certainly dementia, all these things that required hands-on assistance in our later years. And that is averaging about $95,000 a year here in Vegas right now per person. And that's over and above all those healthcare costs you talk about. So I would say the two biggest costs in retirement are housing and healthcare. Housing is easy to quantify. Healthcare is not addressed by most people and absolutely should be. So if your advisor hasn't been talking to you about that, holy cow, come visit with us, because that is pure malpractice in my mind, and unfortunately is the norm out there. People are not talking about health care and long-term care. That's what blows up people's retirement plans.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.